Hey folks. I guess we'll get going now. It's 6:35. I know some folks wanted to trickle in a little bit later on. Um, we are recording this session as is pretty customary for our PM Club sessions. Um, the recording, I'll just say, if you're feeling a bit antsy about being on a recording, say it's mostly my slide deck that is being shown, and recordings are only given out if people request them, if they wanted to come, if they had a lot of interest in the session but wasn't able to come. So they're on our private YouTube channel, just so you all know where that's going and where it's being distributed. Thanks so much for joining. We are a small but mighty group, and I'm always so flattered when people are nerdy enough to want to come out and listen to production managers talk about themselves for 2 hours. So thank you all for being here. Maybe a show of emoji reactions. Is this, tell me if this is your first time at PM Club. Okay. Maria, sweet Maria. Yes, Haley. Also nice to see you, Haley. Haley was a student of mine at Sheridan, so hilarious that you've graduated now, I think, or you're done with classes and now you're back. Awesome, love it. Second time for Christina. Great. Nice to meet you, Christina. Heard many a thing about you. Hope we meet in real life sometime. Okay, well, I think most of you are sort of aware of what PM Club, but I'll just about what PM Club is, but I'll just give a little high level description of what we aim to do in PM Club. My name is Crystal Lee. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a production manager in Toronto. And yeah, I started PM Club a while ago in 2022, actually, because I thought it was funny that it feels like there's a lot of gatekeeping in the industry. So as being a part of like maybe this generation of folks, we as a collective at Means of Production, and me as a theater professional, I guess, wanted to make sure that that wasn't the case um, for the rest of my career. So anything that I'm learning, anything that I'm struggling with, anytime I sit in the shit, anytime I'm really successful in something, I want to be really transparent with other folks who are interested in this side of the industry, because it's really dire out there. There are not a lot of folks who do this job. I don't find there's a lot of training actually in educational institutions for this kind of work. Same thing with producing. I find that's a major gap in our industry. And yeah, and I think it's a collective responsibility to, share as much knowledge as you can, because the community is small and we deserve to take care of each other. So that's kind of the whole point of PM Club. And since this year, since January 2024, we've decided to kind of branch out and keep it under a really great collective called Means of Production, who really shares a lot of these values. I'm part of the collective. You can also be part of the collective if you're passionate about kind of changing this side of the industry bit by bit, making things more sustainable. Work-life balance seems cool. All of those kinds of things. We talk a lot about that within the collective. We meet every Monday, one Monday every month now. It used to be more frequent during the pandemic, and now we just kind of do like a lot of panel discussions. We try to challenge as much as we can in the industry, and a lot of us are also production managers or technical directors of our own venue or organization. So we feel that we've empowered each other to like change a little bit within the industry within our own organization. So that's been really successful in the last year or so. But all to say that PM Club, with all of its success, has moved into Means of Production. We started a whole series. Really happy that some of you are returning to some of these ideas in the series. The first 6 months have been a pilot project, so we're hoping that this will continue on as a network. We'll get more folks who volunteer to run these sessions, because my capacity dwindles sometimes. And like, hopefully we'll hold like networking events. Yeah. just a place to kind of connect and share some resources. So that's PM Club, that's MOP, that's me. And I always say with a big fat disclaimer that everything that I talk about in PM Club is really based off of my own experiences and primarily in independent theater in Toronto. Yeah, so you can take it with a grain of salt. You can feel free to use any templates or any learnings here and tweak it to whatever discipline you're working in or whatever style you want to work in. This is really just maybe one anchor point that you can take along with you. And yeah, I think it's perfectly valid to take as much foundational knowledge as you can and then fuck shit up after. So that's going to be my my goal for y'all. Yeah, party time. So this session particularly is called Time and Money. Haley, this might be familiar to you because it is like a smorgasbord of like things that I've talked about in class. In my part-time life, I like to do a little bit of teaching at Sheridan. So the template is very much the same, the PowerPoint template. But yeah, this particular series is based off of a previous series that I did talking about budgeting, the basics of budgeting. And then I ran out of time because there's so much to talk about in that. And now we're talking a little bit about what the scheduling components are. Everything is very much related. Everything kind of speaks to each other. And as some of you know, if you've heard me talk before about production, you'll know that everything needs a lot of context. So I'll probably say that a lot throughout our time together. Time and Money Part 2, Basics of Scheduling. All right. So what I hope to accomplish today is from now until 8:30, we'll do kind of like a lecture style session. In that, I'm often very ambitious with time, so I don't want to overpromise something, but at the very least, while we're talking about some concepts, I do want to show you some examples that I've used or that I've created, just so you can get a sense of like what I mean as we go through. And then I'm going to hold a half hour at the end. The session is actually from 6:30 to 9, but we like to hold that extra half hour at the very end, which is totally optional. If you are like, everything was crystal clear, then, you can leave. But if you want to just like hold some time and ask me or anyone else here a question, feel free to do that. It can be about what you've learned today, or if you want to hang out, we can also hang out. All right, so in the agenda, hoping to kind of zoom out first before we really dive into scheduling. It's really important, again, to talk about context, to talk about your work back plan, or some people like to call it a work forward plan. So something that will contextualize what the heck you're scheduling. So that's always a good starting point. I'll talk a little bit about phases of production. What are the expectations of like maybe your job in pre-production? I find people say pre-production and don't really know what it means sometimes, but it actually is a massive nuance of things that happen throughout that time before you actually hit install, or before you hit rehearsal, or before you hit tech, right? So we'll kind of talk about what that heat map looks like. We'll go into types of scheduling. There's lots of language in the industry. What I'll probably list is like things that I've most commonly heard in the industry. The beautiful thing, the bittersweet thing about theater is that it's very flexible in terms of how people do theater. That can obviously be a hindrance sometimes. Sometimes we need a little bit of structure. But yeah, just to say that, there's some common language out there that I've seen used in the industry, and we'll just talk about what that actually means. We'll focus in on some big boys, those big boys being the production calendar and the difference between that and a tech weekly. Sometimes they are very different, and I've seen other folks assume that they're all the same thing. So they have different reasons why they're distributed when, and why they're formatted the way they are. We'll do a small little pause. We'll kind of rethink like, okay, maybe this is a lot. Like I actually don't know what I don't know right now. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means and how to kind of move past that. We'll jump back into a big boy. We'll talk about the Tech Weekly and sort of the anatomy of that. As some of you know, I feel like there is definitely an art to a production meeting. So we'll talk a little bit about when production meetings need to happen, and sort of what the priorities are throughout that timeline. And then hopefully, you know, this is really filled with 2 hours and we have a bit of time to talk a little bit about the practical side. So I'll definitely give you all the resources available so that you can take either the slide deck or some examples and piecemeal something on your own time. But I really just want to kind of go through the foundation of it. Yeah, and then we'll show what it looks like in practice. Any questions? Thumbs up. Great. All right. So overview of a work back. Some of you know this already, but just to give a bit of a zoom out, every work back is different. A work back plan is basically a big to-do list that is like chronological. So a work back will show you like this needs to happen before this needs to happen. This is due on this date. This is who's responsible for that task. And when you enter a project, it's good to have everything sort of listed out so that you know that you're following a good timeline that makes sense with the process. Some are kind of dependent on like contractual obligations. For example, like a designer deadline might be something that was written in a contract that should go in your work back plan. Maybe you've rented space from a venue and the venue needs to know certain information. That deadline should be in your work back plan. All of these things, like if you're applying for DORA awards, that should also be in the work back so that you make sure that you're not missing the key components of what that application needs. So this plan is really built off of all the dependencies, and you work on your work back plan with your producer typically. So it's not all on you. There's also other types of planning that is sort of in the orbit of maybe a production work back. For example, marketing, those typically intersect. Maybe a fundraising work back plan that might intersect as well with your work back plan. But all you need to know is that this plan is going to help you kind of figure out what your chronology needs to be for your production calendar, and then for your technical weekly. Yeah, so a big part of this process is that you're doing a lot of info gathering when you first sign up for a project, right? You first got hired. So you're doing a lot of this info gathering, you're building a work back plan, you're moving into what we call pre-production, which is basically everything before you hit rehearsal. You get into your rehearsal planning, and hopefully, you know, actors are happy, performers are happy, stage management is happy, director, creative, all of them are happy in a room, and you're kind of focusing on all of the other components that are happening, sort of in conjunction with rehearsal process. Prop notes, wardrobe notes, set notes. You're going to get all the notes. Everyone's going to have an opinion about something, and it'll be your time to kind of focus in on smaller nitty-gritty stuff during that time. You're also building stuff. You're probably building wardrobe. You're probably building your set at this time. So those things kind of work very closely together. Then you're moving into your prep for install, your install proper, and then your tech when everyone kind of moves into the space, and then you're on. So that's a big like high level of like the concentrated stuff that you have to do. Work back shows all of that and more. And I'll just maybe show you an example. I've definitely showed this many times in PM Club and in classes. Um, but I'll show again. Yeah. So I'll send this out to everyone at the end or after the session. This is one example of a work back plan. The organization I work for at Why Not Theater, we have a very different type of work back plan that kind of encapsulates like the whole season sometimes. This is a very project specific. This work back plan is maybe an example of like someone hired me to be a production manager. They gave me like an 18-week timeline. And I'm like freaking out because I need to figure out all the things that I have to do. So me and my producer sit down together and we talk about all of the goals that need to be accomplished in that time. So hope y'all can see this well. Maybe I can zoom in a bit more. Whoa. But they're divided into phases that I just talked about. So upon hiring, you're doing all that info gathering, like we mentioned. 18 weeks is like one reference point. Hopefully it's more than 18 weeks. I think I pulled this out when I was really in my indie phase when I first got to Toronto. And on average, this is when people were like, oh, yeah, I think we need a production manager and would call me up and hire me. So, yeah, hopefully, I know it's so classic, right? So, hopefully, you're getting a bit more time here, but always adjust your timeline based on maybe use this as a reference and kind of scale it to the time that you think you need. I built this because a friend of mine was like, I don't know where to start. And I was like, you know what? Could be nice to have a resource. And it's been really helpful for me actually in my career as well. There are a lot of deadlines to really think about. Not all of them are relevant to every project. So I always use this as a guide. I pull out all the pieces that I think would be relevant, and then I create my new work back plan and share it with my producer. This tells me who is assigned to what task so that I have a bit of oversight on tasks. I know who's doing it. I know who to delegate that task to. So pre-production, rehearsal, and scenic builds, as I mentioned. So this is all kind of happening while we're in rehearsal. And typically the milestones that we want to hit. Then in our prep for rehearsal, you'll see an overlap between, obviously rehearsal is still happening when you're in prep mode going into the theater. So these are the things maybe that you want to think about. Your gel and gobo list, for instance. When I was in theater school, I just thought every venue had their own gel and gobo stock. Blew my mind when I found out everyone just purchases this stuff. So yeah, it's good to know like what your gel and gobo list is at least 5 days before focus, because this is just one example, but 5 business days is typically how long it takes for gel to come in, gel and gobos to come in. Your install, so these are obviously all the things that you would typically do during that time. Things that you would add into your tech weekly. Your tech, we're all very familiar with this stage. And then, of course, we're very familiar with the rents and post-show. And the stuff that we have to do after the show. So reconciliation, your returns, the strike, all of that fun stuff. Yeah. Any questions about work back? You will get this. You will get to dive into it more, and hopefully you can use it. Cool. And as scary as this might look like, again, this is not all your responsibility, right? This is just stuff that you need to know is like happening in and around you so you can check in on it. Or it helps to kind of set expectations and set assumptions. Maybe your set designer is new and actually doesn't know what a prelim is, or what the difference is between a prelim and a final, for instance, or how that helps the team or how that helps you. So it's good to like have it all listed out And then you can kind of dictate those responsibilities to your team. Swoop. Okay, back to the Canva. Oh no, that didn't work at all. Shit, one sec. There we go. I made a fun new slide. It's my salad because I don't know. I've had salad on the brain recently, but something I always like to say for everything, when we're starting out, when we're zooming out, and I hope this salad empowers you to make healthy choices. Um, and to create healthier things in your life, like healthy budgets and healthy schedules. But I always say that a production manager, actually anyone, it applies to anyone. I think everyone deserves to have some basic information before they sign a contract. I think when I first started in the industry, I had a lot of fears of like scarcity. I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I was just like kind of saying yes no matter what, and it put me in places that made me feel unsafe sometimes, or made me feel exploited. So I've learned along the way to ask for more information. And I've prioritized some things that you should get bare minimum of, and all of these things should. The idea here is that all of these ingredients should give you a nice healthy salad. Salad of success. Oh, this analogy is spot on, I think. But yeah, what I'm saying here is that some of these ingredients are really important. For example, you should know your budget container. You should know what the vision of the show is. You should receive outside dates for obvious reasons. How can you possibly schedule anything, or how can you possibly understand your own availability if you don't have those dates? And when I say outside dates, we'll talk about this a little more later, but outside dates are usually just the container. So when do you start tech? When is your first preview? When are you closing the show? When are we allowed in the space? These are basic pieces of information that you should be getting from your producer or whoever is contracting you. And that will correspond with the venue. Hopefully, before they've hired you, they have already decided on a venue and they have already negotiated that contract with the venue. It is not your responsibility to find a venue. It is not your responsibility to sign any agreements with the venue. It's your responsibility to just make sure it all works in the venue. So definitely prioritize knowing what the venue is, knowing what the budget-ish is. You know, it's a big difference between $20,000 production budget and a $120,000 production budget. Makes you think differently about how you're going to attack the project, right? So just knowing like how much they're setting aside for production is really important. Like I said, show vision. Good to know the artistry that you're going to get behind. Now that I'm older and hopefully wiser, I'm prioritizing more things that don't burn me out. And if I am going to find myself in a place where I don't have as many resources and I might be outputting a lot more energy, I want to make sure that I have a lot of buy-in in the artistry, because it sucks to be a part of a project that you hate and also burn yourself out, right? It's got to like, something's got to give. So hopefully if you are going to output more resource, you actually are passionate about the message and then the value of the show and the impact it's going to have on the community. So I would definitely prioritize that. Your team, good to know, like, is there a TD? Are you the TD? Are you also the driver? Are you also the carpenter? Are you also, you know, X, Y, and Z? Are you the kitchen sink trap of the show? Is there budget to maybe find more people to help you? And that also leads to like resources available. Is the producer or the company thinking about like transportation budget, for instance, Or are you using your car for everything? Something I did in my first year, and I didn't ever ask for like mileage or gas money. And that was an expense on me. So, good to know what your resources are. Is there an in-house shop, or is that something that you are going to have to put labor towards and find a shop that can deliver all the goods? Stuff like that. I would say things that are like maybe maybe secondary, but depends on what your values are. Nowadays I really like to know what organization I'm kind of putting my name towards. I definitely don't want to have a bad reputation because I worked with a company that has a bad reputation, or maybe their mandate and their values don't actually align with mine, because I am also an artist and I want to make sure that my community sees me as, the things that I value about myself. What are the politics of the company, or of the people who are involved? The community is very small, folks. So sometimes, certain directors or certain designers or even those partnerships can cause a bit more drama for you than maybe you have bandwidth for. But if you have buy-in into the show and you have all the time in the world to deal with that drama, then maybe it's worth it. But good to know what the politics are. And what are some important elements to consider? Is there fire? Is there water? Are there extra elements that you might have to think about that might cause you to like outsource some consultation, maybe rethink how you're budgeting, maybe rethink how you're focusing on the project, maybe safety concerns, maybe it actually doesn't jive well with the venue and no one's actually asked that question. So yeah, good things to consider to make a lovely salad of information. Yes. Okay. Another graphic for you. I've showed this around before. I think it's super helpful now that it's outside of my brain. But all those phases of production that I talked about earlier, I've thrown them into a bit of a graphic so that y'all can see. It also works really well with the work back plan that I just showed you. So this graphic kind of shows a bit of that overlap that I was talking about. So you're doing a bit of your info gathering. This is maybe your onboarding time. You're learning a lot. Maybe you're talking to the director. Maybe you're talking to designers. You're definitely asking the producer what the drama is between that director and designer. Any context that you can get during that time will only help with your own onboarding and how you kind of execute the project. During that info gathering, this is when you're transitioning into your pre-production, and maybe you're also onboarding other folks. I've talked about a PM package at one point during PM Club. For those of you who don't know what a PM package is, it's like your big packet of information that you send out to your whole team. This is the schedule. This is the budget. This is how you get petty cash. This is where you put your receipts. This is the venue we're going into. Yeah, I don't know. What else? Here's the COVID safety plan. Like here are some, I don't know, photos of the last time we remounted this show. Like just contextual stuff that you can give to your designers, so that designers, stage manager, anyone on your team, so that they have all the tools that they need in order to do their job. So that's a PM package of info from your PM, and that will typically go into this blue line here. Now you're overlapping with rehearsal. You're still doing your own pre-production, which might be the builds, which is like checking in on rehearsal. And then you're planning for install. Now you're like, okay, we're ready. We've built the set. We're getting ready to move. We've collected all the things. I've bought a shit ton of gaff tape. I'm ready. So you're prepping that week. Everyone else still has focus in the rehearsal hall. Designers at this point are probably sending out their plots. They're seeing the show in rehearsal so that they have a better understanding of their plots and stuff, so that they can give you so that you can prep for install. And at some point you're actually installing, you're actually in the venue. And the rest of your team, aka the performers, stage management, directors, they're still in rehearsal. So you've got some time to like build everything in the theater. And then here, excuse me, I had a little brain fart. So you're still kind of installing probably in the mornings. And then actors are finally allowed on deck. They'll do some cueing. Maybe you're doing some notes in the morning again, and then they're following afternoon, evening, continuing their cueing. And then at some point, everyone is all together and it's bliss. It's like it's when the production manager is like, okay, I'm gonna like sit back in the darkness while y'all do your dress rehearsals and I'm gonna like reconcile receipts, or like I'm just gonna clean up because last week was chaos and now this is my time because everyone is all together. Everyone is just kind of responding to things that are happening in the moment. It's important for you to be there, it's important for you to be present, but for the most part, things are under control, hopefully. And you're just kind of in your cleanup time. And that's this blissful moment right here. What's even more blissful is when we've opened the show and you're not doing anything except waiting for the show to close. So that's happening in this little purple section. A little bit of overlap here where you're planning for your loadout, your strike plan. You actually do all that and then you reconcile the show, which is collecting all those receipts, making sure that you weren't over budget, hopefully. And if you were, that's okay. But, you know, good to have all that foresight. You're making sure people are reimbursed. You're collecting all those invoices from maybe crewing. Yeah. And hopefully your show goes on tour. So you're also collecting all of this information, putting it in a nice little package and saying, hey, producer, don't forget to hire me back for the tour. And then you'll close the show. How are we feeling? Is this making sense? Salads and graphs. Great. Cool.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Cool. Love the graphics. They speak my language. So when like values is so interesting and I talk about it so much in my field. So I was just curious, what are a few values that you find organizationally really align or that you've seen a theme of for like good experiences? Not that any one is the same, but or are there some that you find are, you know, is it not knowing your values that can sometimes be a bit of a red flag in both directions? Or yeah, just like wondering if there's anything extra around values that you have examples about.
No, that's a great question, Maria. For me, I mean, I'm definitely a minority in my own industry. Like, I don't think there are a lot of women of color, young women of color, who are PMs or seen as strong PMs, which is maybe the problem there is that they're not seen as like being strong because they're too feminine or you know what, like I have a very bubbly personality when I'm on stage. I can be very intense when I need to be, but for the most part I'm outputting like this like happy cheery like positive vibe, which is not what a lot of production managers of a different generation were. So I think for me, like my value is more in a lot of cross collaboration in executive leadership and artistic leadership than how an institution runs. So if you've hung out with me before, I've like shit talked a lot about Shaw Festival because I did 3 months residency there, and it's really because my values did not align with them. They were a predominantly white institution. They were very calcified in the way that they ran their projects. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying that it just didn't jive with me because I like talking to people. I like collaborating with people, and they were very hierarchy based. They were very, you know, at some point I like heard someone say, sometimes I like to just say no to like put people in their place. Very not my style. Like I don't really enjoy, like to me, that's not in the spirit or the service of helping to build the art. I think it gives a bad rap to folks who are on the side of the industry, because we're seen as like no people, and that's not what it actually is. So yeah, that was one value, was that I prefer a lot of collaboration. So the more relationships that I can build within like the leadership circles, artistic, executive, my producer, that's where I feel like yeah, there's just more fun in that, right? Because everyone has a seat at the table, everyone's like doing it for the same reason. Yeah, along with that, I would say having a lot of good representation in a company. It's it's a bit uncomfortable to be in a room that has like no folks of color or like no minoritized folks, and like we're doing a Shakespeare, like it just doesn't feel like something that I want to put a lot of my energy into. Yeah, so I guess maybe those are some of the values. Uh, yeah, yeah, I think those are
That's awesome.
two. Yeah,
Yeah, thanks. That was
no
great.
worries.
Yeah,
No worries.
it's so cool and nice to see it like named and talked about. I think it can be a great guiding thing for us in anything in life, but to see it here and that it's something you're allowed to also have like make choices around can be really empowering. Yeah, that's
Yeah, yeah,
awesome.
definitely. And I mean, I think, as you said, like empowerment is such an important part of the process, like especially as a leader in whatever tier you're in, like production management is very much middle management, I think, in the grand scheme of things. But like I don't feel empowered if I'm the only one making the decisions all the time. Like I want to have feedback, I want to have voices, and if I don't have that relationship, then I can't actually do the best version of the job. So yeah, but some people don't function that way. Some people have massive egos and it works in an institution for them. So, power to them. I don't have that kind of confidence. Yeah. Yeah, but thanks for asking. It's a good question. Um, and yeah, everyone has different values. So, uh, I love to align myself also. For those of you who don't know, I'm half Chinese. So, I love to do works that are very culturally specific, whether it's part of my community or not, because it just feels like there's greater impact on a community that might not be seen as like, the Shaw Festival community, or like the Shaw Festival audience, or the Stratford audience, or the Princess of Wales audience. Like there's something more meaningful to know that I'm like behind a change. Yeah, so it gives me life. Yeah. Don't mean to shit on all the festivals. Whoopsies. Did it again. Yeah. All right. So types of schedules. Yeah, important to distinguish these because it's definitely language that we kind of throw around. So I mentioned earlier outside dates when we were talking about the salad. Outside dates are really just something that your producer gives you. And they're mostly venue or box office related, as in when do tickets go on sale, like when our audience is allowed to see the first show, when are previews, when is closing, is there an extension week? Like those are all sort of within the language of outside dates. And that's something, again, to make good salad, is something your producer should give you. A production calendar. We'll talk about this more in depth because it's a big boy. Built by you, the PM in this case, with a consultation from your producer. Again, I love a lot of consultation. I love a lot of collaboration. It makes me feel empowered in my work. So I will always send out a first pass of the calendar to my producers just so that they can see what is going on. You know what another value is? Sorry, just to jump back. People getting paid right. People getting paid right. If you're just going to be a part of a company who's like constantly going to undervalue everyone else, maybe they value you but they undervalue everyone else, it's hard to feel good about being on that team. Yeah. Hold up. If people are getting paid shit, I'm not being a part of that company. Wow, I was so passionate in that moment. Yeah. So another value. Production calendar. Going back to production calendar. You should be seeing a lot of deadlines, a lot of milestones. Just to kind of keep the process going. I'll show you what this looks like in practical, but yeah, good to know at a glance, like where are the deadlines for set costumes, lighting, sound. When are the runs of the show happening in rehearsal? Good to know, because that's a good milestone. What are the shop schedules? Yeah. Production calendar is really like an at a glance. I love color in my calendars, in my schedules, because I think visually it really helps. Good formatting really helps bring a lot of confidence to your team. So if you have pretty nice paperwork with lots of colors, the colors, do what you will. Some people really hate colors. Some people prefer to like do grayscale, and that's totally cool, but make it nicely formatted, make it easy to read. And that's what a production calendar is. It's an at a glance, high level, here are all the things that are happening, easy to read, easily accessible. And it's for the entirety of the company. So less for the venue, like, you're going to do a show at Soul Pepper. Soul Pepper staff doesn't really need to know what's going on, but your internal company needs to know when you're going into Soul Pepper and when you need to give the plots to Soul Pepper, that kind of thing. It's really for the internal. And of course, it's part of your PM package, that big, nice package that you're giving to your whole team. Tech Weekly forever, however, is a breakdown of each day. So this is where you're getting a little bit more specific in nuance. Yeah, specific in nuance. There's a bit more of an hourly breakdown so that you can see what are the goals for each call. Yeah, separated by calls. As many of you know, union calls or tech calls are typically 4-hour slots. You might do a maximum of 3 of those 4-hour calls, so a 12-hour day. Less and less the norm. I think people really like that work-life balance, so they're doing less of those 12-hour days. But shamelessly, you'll see all of my tech weeklies are like 12-hour days for some of those days. But yeah, it's becoming more and more favorable to do 8-hour days instead. So what do you want to accomplish in those days? This is definitely helpful for the venue, whereas maybe the production calendar isn't. So this kind of breakout is super helpful for them to understand what your goals are throughout the week so that they can help you achieve those goals. Includes tasks for each department. And again, part of your PM package. It's always subject to improvements, as we like to say. So yeah, you might have to change on the fly. You might learn more about the show. It might, the director maybe decided, you know what, I do want to have fire in the show, and we have to find time to like troubleshoot that. So you're gonna have to tweak your schedule as you go. And a tech daily. Tech dailies, I mean, I think we're very familiar with the language of rehearsal dailies, which is typically sent out by the stage management team. This is the same thing, but a production manager will send this. And I've learned since I've been to Toronto that not everyone does this. It's so bizarre. I think most schools do it though. So if you like went to theater school, you probably know that this is pretty common. And it should be, because it really helps to define like, what are those tech note sessions? Is it dark time? Is it loud time? Is it bright and loud time? Bright and quiet time? I don't know. So we got to know what the priorities of the day are based off of what we've learned the day before. Yeah, so it's either we're confirming what the weekly says, or we're completely abandoning that weekly and we're saying the plan has changed as of last night. Here's what we're working on tomorrow. Okay, and ancillary stuff. yeah, stuff that you might just kind of hear, good to know about, but maybe not super necessary to your practice. Stage management will always send a pile of paperwork as well to their actors, their performers. All that stuff that I just showed you before. Cast is not looking at that. Cast will probably not really know who you are, what you do, why you're important, why you have value, that you're just there. But everyone else on the production team will definitely value you for your paperwork. But what they're receiving on their end, which makes sense because it's just streamlining process on the stage management side, is that stage management is going to make a monthly for their rehearsals. They're going to make dailies. They're also going to make a performance schedule, which will be aligned with your weekly. So I guess just to kind of zoom out a little bit there, I will always start before a stage manager does. I will build all of these like basic pieces of paperwork. I will send it to stage management. Stage management will create their own schedules and things based off of the thing that I made. And then we'll send it to the performers. Some other ancillary stuff, if you're working in an institution or in a space that does have like in-house resources like a shop, they will typically have their own schedules, and those will typically be like Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 kind of jam. They don't follow a show like a 12-hour on a Saturday kind of show install schedule. I've seen very often, like in those institutions, that they are actually a different crew that have different minimums. They don't even ever go on the stage. They just build the thing and then they give it to like a stage version of themselves. And then that person will kind of implement it. So not something you totally need to know. It's good context for you to add into your production calendar, for instance, so that people understand like, oh, well, if I need to get this note done, well, I have to plan for a Monday to Friday, 8 to 5, because that's when they're open, as opposed to a Sunday afternoon. Yeah, different phases, different crews. And they're probably working on like multiple shows instead of just your show, right? Musicians are a whole other can of worms. They operate, so maybe for production folks, we know like IATSE as a union, and we probably know CAEA, which is the actor, stage manager, and choreographer director union or association. So they all kind of abide by their own rules that are very, very similar. So it's easy to make schedules that are based off of those union agreements. Musicians, slightly different. They operate on their own kind of timeline. Musicians, for instance, don't need a pre-show. They just need what we call a downbeat. So we just say, yo, downbeat is at 8. That's when the show starts, and they will come whenever they want to come. My husband is a music director. He will come 5 minutes before the show starts, which is terrifying. I think if I were a stage manager, I don't know, I'd be like, yo, I can't, just like text me, tell me you're on your way. But that's just how it is on their agreement. Not only that, but they typically don't work with 4-hour calls like the rest of us do. They work with 3-hour calls. So the scheduling gets a bit like tricky in that maybe the first hour we don't have musicians, and then hour 2, 3, and 4 we do. So just some small idiosyncrasies there. The way they receive information too is very different. I've known many musicians who are like, whoa, 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 why are you giving me all these schedules? Like none of it has to do with me. Please just give me a list of dates. So every time I work with musicians, like on a musical, for instance, I will always extract all of the musician info, create their own calendar in either list format or calendar format, and just send it off to them. Picky, picky performers. I say with love because I'm married to one. Any questions? My fun egg face. Is this making sense? Cool. All right. We shall continue on then. Okay. What is the difference, Crystal, between a production calendar and a tech weekly? You keep talking about this. Um, yeah, maybe this is time for a little quiz. Can we name one difference between a production calendar and a tech weekly in the chat or in real voices?
May I?
Yeah, go for it.
I would say for like production calendar would be the entire timeline of the production, pre-production, the runtime, the show performance week, and the post-production. Tech weekly would mostly be for that particular week, uh, in detail, with lots of timings and maybe even like who's called it,
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Yeah, excellent. Hit the nail on the head. Yes, correct. Yeah, a production calendar is more like a calendar format where we see like the at a glance, like all of the things, the whole process. It's really great how you said that. And then a technical weekly is really just the zoom in on that time, the crunchiest, hottest time in the heat map, where we're all together doing 1,000 things at once. Yeah, you got it, Quash. Good job.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've also broken them out here. So production calendar, the format here is a monthly, tech weekly, obviously the format is a weekly. Yeah, as you said, like we're getting a good snapshot of the whole process. I would say maybe not the whole process, like, so for example, when I start on, we probably don't need to know the first few weeks because there's nothing going on for anyone because I'm like just starting, right? So probably once it gets a bit more busy for folks, it's good to start showing what that means. Over here, yeah, Tech Weekly, just the weeks of tech and maybe the full run if it's a short run. But if it's like a run that's like, for months and months, don't throw that on your Tech Weekly. But good to show like what the timeline will be for the show calls, right? Like when does tech come in on show days? What are matinee call times? What are evening performance call times? Is there a talk back? Like having all of those inputted into your Tech Weekly would be good. Good to know. What is the purpose of a production calendar? The why might be some high level goals. And the Tech Weekly, the why is more a granular breakdown of goals. For distribution, we want all the departments to see the production calendar. And distribution here, we want all the departments to see, but we will omit the rehearsal schedule. The rehearsal schedule is already being covered by someone else, aka the stage manager. Also on the production calendar side, the distribution is mainly for the company on the project. Again, just internal staff. And here in the Tech Weekly, we're sending this out to the venue, to the heads of departments who are typically on the venue side. Yeah. Production calendar. How? Large span of time. What did I mean by that? Oh, yeah. Yeah, right. It's sort of like the formatting too. Like we really just want to see like basic information. Tech Weekly, we want to see like the specific work calls. Yeah. Okay, so this is like where we're gonna pause for a little hot minute. And just say that like if you don't know how to schedule, this is something it honestly came out a lot in the Sheridan classes that I were teaching, Haley, where like people were like, yo, I'm not interested in being a PM. So like, how can I possibly do this if I don't know how other departments work? Totally. I don't pretend to know everything about everything. there were certain disciplines before I became a manager that I was most interested in. Probably like sound and music was like really interesting to me, but I rarely know anything about lighting. I have a lot of respect for people who do lighting and photometrics and that math and have such confidence in what they're doing in focus and programming. I could never. I'm also not a great carpenter, you know, like I know how to do things enough so that I can schedule them. And a lot of it is based off of learning, and a lot of it is based off of asking a billion million questions and probably looking dumb all the time, but whatever, no shame. Because your job is to like try and make a guess that is going to work for everyone. And if it doesn't work, then you get that feedback. It's all subject to improvements. You improve it, and then you go on with your life. So yeah, I'll say that if you don't know any other departments, it's okay, because a lot of it is formulaic to some degree. And the timing might change. I think we're all smart people in that we know if there are a lot of lights, you probably need way more time to focus those lights than you might if you only had like 10 lights, for instance, right? So it's all about scale. And again, you rely on your team. I love that cross collaboration. You talk to them, you see how it might jive with them. If they feel good about it, great, you've locked it in. But if you're a good PM, if you can really read the room, oh my gosh, I really laughed when I reread this stuff. You can read the room, you're not a narcissist, you can show a bit of empathy. Empathy is so important in the job. You can really zoom out and look at the big picture. You're not afraid to ask questions, ask why, ask how, ask all the dumb questions and learn from it. And if you can be flexible and troubleshoot, I think like, I want to say like 80% of my job is like people skills, people management, like people politics, being a good listener, and like critical thinking. 20% is like actually knowing what everyone does. Yeah, I sort of have my own assumptions about things. Yeah, but I did want to say, I've showed this matrix before. I use it as a resource often, but if you're ever feeling like, you know, you need those creative juices to start flowing, this is one example. Haley, hilariously, I think I'm just going to use the same example that we used in class that one time. Really regurgitating. Sorry, not sorry. Yeah, so you might remember, wow, this matrix, which is called my department intersections. Oh my God, it's such a funny name. It's like assessing your blind spots, you know, like by department. And literally Haley's class did this work, and now I'm just showing it to the world. So this is what it is. This matrix is all of the departments that I could think of on one axis, and then the same departments on the other axis. And what's great about this exercise, this was an exercise that when I applied, I went to National Theatre School. When I applied for National Theatre School, they gave me this to see how much I knew about other departments. And I loved it. I thought it was great because I didn't know a lot about other departments. And this really made me think about like how they related to each other. So I'll send this out to y'all. This is really just like an example, but I'll send it out to you and you can use it as a resource as you need to, as a tool. But yeah, you know, you take sound and lighting, for example. What are some questions that you might be asking the sound and lighting team as they relate to each other? For them, they're probably thinking about the timing, so maybe how their cues align, real estate in the grid, that's probably something that's really concerning to them. Is someone going to hang a speaker where a moving light is going to be? That's important. Yeah, the same thing on the ground, crashing on stage with actors. You know, good to know that lighting maybe has some footlights and we don't want to put a monitor right in front of those footlights. That feels counterproductive. So these are maybe questions that you might want to start asking or making sure that you're aware of so that they can start talking to each other. That's a big part of your job. Music and sound, obviously a very cross collaborative department. Sometimes I've seen like sound worlds get in their own silos about things because they're a bit intimidated by music. So good to like, facilitate those conversations. More examples, stage management and lighting, cueing. Oh, we spelled cueing wrong several times in this matrix. Oopsies. That says cueing. So stage management and lighting, probably talking a lot about cueing. What else could they possibly ask about? Maybe stage management is asking about like how many blackouts there might be, and maybe that becomes a conversation about like, do we need an infrared camera? Do we need some sort of cue light system? These are all good questions for lighting to consider and for stage management to like create a plan around. Sound, someone wrote cueing as well, sound and rehearsal, like is there going to be maybe a cue lab that we can work off of? Yeah, are there mics involved? Music and stage management, same thing. As I said, my husband works as a music director, so there's often a lot of like logistical conversations happening between music director and stage management around like, is that something you're cueing? Is that something I'm cueing on my end? Like, are the actors looking to me? Are they looking at a lighting cue? Like, what is sort of the order of operations in that sense? And it just kind of goes on and on and on. Like I said, being a production manager, you don't have to know everything about everything. You just have to be really good at asking a lot of dumb questions. So if you ever feel like you're stuck, especially as it relates to like how to schedule or how to budget, this is a really great opportunity to like cross-reference all of those departments and think about like, okay, if I were them, I might have questions about this, or I might have concerns about this. And then you can kind of play anticipating those questions ahead of time. I'm glad you still have it, Haley. Any questions about this? I think if we had more time, we could actually do the exercise, but it's a lot to talk about. Thanks, Maria. Alrighty. Shall we go back to those slides? Yeah, so this exercise I find is really helpful to discover like how choices maybe affect other people. In many PM clubs and in many classes, I've talked about RACI as a really common project management tool, which is just an acronym that stands for Responsible, Accountable, Consult, and Inform. It's something we do a lot in my organization at Why Not Theater. It's basically how we operate because we just want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable and empowered in the work that they're doing. So I find this kind of matrix really helps like understand, yeah, like who is responsible for that thing? Is it me or is it the stage manager or is it the lighting person or who, I'm just going to ask the question. And if it is my job, great. Like we've talked about it, but maybe it's not, maybe it's actually not your responsibility. Maybe it's actually someone else and you were just smart enough to think about the question. It generates a lot of assumptions and questions, and you start to develop like a starting point for each department. One good practice, especially folks who might be early in their production management careers, is good to like meet with designers very early in the process and just kind of see like what do they need in this kind of process, you know, like what do they need to do their best work, and how can you help them do their best work. Not all designers are created equally, not all production managers are created equally, like everyone has a different way of working, so it will only help you succeed in doing your job if you like vet out what they need in their process, right? Just a hot tip. Okay. An anatomy of a tech weekly. Maybe, is it helpful if I show you a production calendar before we actually get into the tech weekly? Maybe a thumbs up or a no reaction at all if you don't care. Okay, cool. Okay, yes. Let's do it. Time to show you some examples. Not all are amazing. Some are embarrassing. That's fine. This is what it is. Okay. So when I do my like production scheduling, I always do it in like some form of Excel document or Google Sheets. I love Google Sheets. I love Google Workspace because it just helps me kind of curate a space where all the information goes into. So you can do it in a few different ways. There's like a bit of controversy with creating a living document where people can go in and change whatever. But I'll say, in my experience, most people aren't shitheads like that, and they will just rely on you to do all that work. And if they have notes, they will tell you. They won't just go into your schedule and fuck shit up. So, you know, definitely whatever you find will make you feel better or make you more comfortable. You can either PDF it. The thing that I hated about my PDF phase of my career was that I was just issuing out all these new PDFs and people got confused and people were working off old PDFs. I have to do it in this one project that I'm working on right now. And like, we did a production meeting this morning and they gave me notes on version 3. And hilariously, we were on version 9. So, you know, yeah, it just pisses me off. I would much rather use like a live document where all of the changes are just there and people can reference them. Yeah, it was rough. Yeah, they were a company out of England somewhere, or France. And they were like, yeah, we have a bunch of notes. And I was like, oh, but you gave me notes on the wrong version. So then we had to redo the whole process. It was very time consuming. So production calendar. This is sort of what I'm saying by like high level zoom out, like at a glance, all those fun buzzwords. I'm hopefully it's not too hard to read on your end. Maybe I'll zoom in a little bit. But I've tried to use very simple language. I've tried to use very non-aggressive colors. What else did I do? I don't know why I have this fun bar right here. That's a formatting error. Don't worry about that. But yeah, I've tried to dictate like sort of what's going on the Why Not side of things. So for example, this was our Christmas shutdown time. So just block those off. Don't even bother sending the emails. Don't even bother reaching out to our producer. No one's around, but you can reach them. Just kidding. The producer and the PM are actually out of town after that. So you can reach us on Jan 8th. Yeah, our director was also gone the week before. So that's what I'm trying to communicate here. I'm communicating that I'm also remote in New Zealand, that we would have a pre-production meeting, which is kind of the introductory production meeting that we have with the full team. Our producer, Liko, Sorry, guys. Our producer was also in Vancouver, so he was working remotely as well. Go. And now we get into more aggressive colors, which were like deadlines. So here we threw in the lighting and video replots. This was also a remount. So it didn't have a lot of the conventional deadlines that maybe a new project would have, but we had to create deadlines for certain things, like it was going into a different venue. So all the specs for lighting and video had to change, and we had to hire our designers back so that they could do that replotting for us. And I needed to know what that replot would look like so that I could communicate it to the venue. Lighting, video, and sound hires, tech hires is language that we use. Some of you may be familiar with it. Tech hires is like equipment rentals. So I would say, great, your plots are due here so that I have some time to like figure out what rentals I need. The director at one point was saying, oh, it might be useful to have a design meeting just before everyone heads out to Vancouver. So I held some time in there because he said, oh, I'd love to have it during this week. Very last minute, we decided that we were going to change all of the paper props, which there were a lot in this show. So we hired that out so that it could be ready. This decision was probably made at the beginning of the week. And then I was like, okay, if we're going to have like all the new paper props before we leave, which is like in 2 weeks, we got to have a plan for like when you need this stuff by and how we communicate to the subcontractor who's going to build all these paper props. So this was on the producer and the director, who decided that they wanted to take it themselves to figure out what the critical path would be, their work back plan. The paper props were due on February 2nd, which allowed for time for shipping and any notes that needed to come out of it. We actually found out once we received those paper props that like half the props were missing. So we had to like go back to the company. They had to reprint a bunch of stuff. So it was good that we had planned to do it the week out. We had our final production meeting. Stage management, onboarding, and prep happened the week before, or a few days before rehearsal. We had a production meeting. I always plan for a production meeting while we're in stage management onboarding, because that is the first time your stage manager is going to be involved, and they are going to have a lot of questions for the whole team, probably questions that will be relevant for the whole team as well. So it's good to plan for a meeting there. I put TBD because I wasn't sure what the timeline would be yet. We traveled. I traveled the day later. We had a rehearsal. We had 2 days of rehearsal. This was a show with David Suzuki. It was just him and his wife and 2 other actors around a table. It didn't require a lot of rehearsal. They read from scripts. It was very cute. And then we had just like a high level of what Tech Week looked like. So day 1, we did a hang, focus, set, install, levels, and queuing. Again, I don't have times there. I don't have number of calls. I just have my goals. It's my goals that I want to accomplish. Dress rehearsal the following day with some cleanup, and then our first show followed by a post-show Q&A. Same thing for Valentine's Day. We had a dark day, and then kind of the rest of the show schedule here too. Easy peasy, chill, not aggressive, simple language, very simple. I don't want to overcrowd it. Yeah, tried to make it easy to read. Meanwhile, my Tech Weekly looked like this, which does have quite a bit of information here. Yeah, we won't break it down just yet, but just to say, like, that's kind of the difference in formatting here. Won't look at that. Okay, this was a show. Oh my gosh, this was a long time ago. So the formatting is a bit more aggressive than I would like. I've changed up my style since. I've grown. But this was a show, a site-specific show. I use the show a lot as an example because I thought it was such a failure on my part. But it was just a really hard show. It was like mid-COVID. It was outdoors. It was on a flatbed truck. It was like very chaotic. There were a lot of weather stuff happening. But in terms of planning, like listen, the first month it's just empty. Why did I do that? I've learned. I've become better. Don't do this. This is a waste of time. This is a waste of space. Nothing happened in January, but things did happen in February. So if I were to do this again, I would probably just show the beginning of my production calendar in February. Again, because this was like site specific, and it was outdoor, there were a lot of like other operational things that were happening here that wouldn't be part of a conventional show. So, you know, locations need to be confirmed. I had to rent a truck and I had to get some quotes from there. I had all these deadlines that were specific for me. I was planning in times for directors and scenic design to like get together. We had our costume designer was based in India who like, you know, had a very different timeline. She also like works in retail and was a costume designer for this. So like wasn't aware of how the process worked. So I tried to really communicate that in the production calendar for her. Gave some like little notes here, the directors to give some feedback to the costume designer. Design jams, confirm truck, storage. Had some read-throughs in here because they were developing a script. Again, like just milestones to kind of give you a sense, right? And you're not gonna have your prelim set design or your prelim costume design until you have a sense of what the heck you're doing. So this was built off of a read-through being the day before, and then, you know, for set and costume to like zhuzh their prelims a little bit and then release them out. We got a bit heavier in April. This is a hard show, guys. PM package was out, so I finally got to send out all of the details to the whole team. A lot of deadlines followed after that. Our TD was not available for, and then I wasn't available for some time. There was a small workshop that happened. And in July, okay, workshop, we started getting into some consistent production meetings, which was good. We finalized tech hires, aka gear lists. And then we really get into some aggressive coloring here. First day of rehearsal, the truck is delivered. Our rehearsal props and costumes are due. The fitting schedule I've thrown in. Final paint touch-ups I've thrown in. Telling folks where rehearsals are going to be, what the main goals are. I added in some time for crew orientation because it was an outdoor show and there were a lot of safety concerns that, you know, needed some time. We had a production run for designers, what I like to call a humble through of just the show so that all the designers can see it and make any notes and adjustments as they need to. And then here, Lika. I actually didn't throw in like my goals for tech because kind of tech was like several weeks and needed to be struck and set up every day. But I did show like the main show schedules. Yeah. Overall, I think the schedule is a bit underdeveloped. I prefer the last one. But you know, this kind of gives you a sense of where I chose to talk about certain milestones and deadlines. Treemonisha, this is an opera that happened under Volcano Theater that I worked in advancement. There were a lot of production managers on this, so it was important that I dictated or that I announced when people were available and for how long. So yeah, there was a lot of that information there. We had a massive like period costume build that was outsourced by the COC. So it was really important that I communicated when those wardrobe shop schedules were happening. Part of them were happening in a studio that was not on site, and then other parts were happening like at COC. So the wardrobe schedule was a bit nutso butso. They're at a studio here, then there's like some dyeing that happens at York University, and then it goes to COC wardrobe for build and fittings. Like it was wild, friends. I threw in the rehearsal weeks here with the general time, SM prep as well. In and out of this is like when the costings and the costume deadlines and the set deadlines are, when we're meeting in production, when fittings are again. Carlos and I went on vacation to Mexico during this time. It's great. We left it with some PM friends. We had a set build that happened for 3 weeks. This is built into that. Final lighting plot, prelim lighting plot, gobo gel order. When is this? Hilariously, this was the day before install. Oopsies, should have been 5 days before. And then I kind of showed, yeah, the show schedule a bit here. Yeah. Any questions about the formatting of production calendars so far? Making sense? As some of you know, I love a good logo. Pretty paperwork, friends, saves lives, makes people feel good and confident. Yeah. So nerdy. Thank you for indulging me. I really just created this session so that I would feel less like a nerd, or maybe more like a nerd, actually. Okay. Any questions about production calendar before we deep dive into Tech Weekly? My nerd loves your nerd. My nerd loves you.
I can ask one question. Oh, thanks. Always appreciate some visual appeal and thoughtfulness. I was just wondering, like, when you're starting out, for example, or there, say you like went to school and you got certain skills and then you come in and obviously there's different people who do it differently. Um, what do you feel like is most important for people to feel confident in, like that some of the flow will come together and not to worry about perfectionism and putting in like fake performative deadlines versus sort of getting the flow? Does a lot of that come down to like just asking questions and collaborating? Do you feel like there's any certain things that stand out that are important when starting out and you could get really overwhelmed by deadlines and
Yeah,
everything going on?
totally. Yeah, I mean, because ultimately, like, your job is to just make a bunch of assumptions for people, right? And like that can be really uncomfortable for both you and for them. Um, but I think the honesty and the transparency goes a long way. Yeah, when I'm entering a space that like I'm not actually sure how they function, it could be like a group of many people who function differently and have never worked together before. It could be an organization who like clearly has a way of functioning and I'm like the new outcast who's like trying to conform or like figure out like navigate through that. So if it's the latter, I think it's easier to probably not reinvent the wheel where you can, but stay true to your own values and the way that you work. A good strategy is obviously having those little one-on-ones. If you have a good relationship with like you know, your supervisor or your producer in this case, they would have a lot of that insight of like, this is how we typically do things, like, you know, this is how financial works, or this is sort of the culture that we work under. I will try to challenge it. Like I might suggest, like, do you think the company would like be opposed if I actually didn't PDF all these schedules?
Mm,
Work, like, would do you think that they would be stunned by that? Sometimes they will be like a
yeah.
shit on Shaw again. Like if I were to implement my own system at Shaw, it just wouldn't actually work to my advantage, because the majority of those people there already work in a different way, right? So it would be in my best interest to like find a happy medium and like work with my counterparts and like find a way that makes the most sense in terms of communication.
Mm,
Yeah, I think, you know, there's also you have to be careful of like or you have to be aware of like what kind of care you want to bring in. Uh, and that might mean, you know, with transparency, and maybe in your first introductory meeting, like maybe you're formatting that in a way where it's like, okay, this is actually an open meeting where you can tell me what you prefer. You know, like maybe we can actually all come up with a plan together. If all of you don't like production notes at the end of day, like, you know, having a touch base at the end of the day, we won't do it. You know, we'll do it at the top of morning. Maybe that actually works better for everyone, because there's no actual value for me if my team is like, you know, abiding by something that they don't actually believe in. If, you know, if it's just for my benefit, then I'd much rather know like, okay, majority of people prefer to work this way. So I think I can make that accommodation, because it's just makes no difference to me, you know? Yeah, so those are some strategies that I've used in the past. A lot of questions. Yeah, for sure. For sure. I'll say it forever. Yeah. And then like finding, I think, yeah, in those introductory meetings, like you want to have a first impression of like, you are flexible, you can, you know, you're happy to take feedback, you're happy to change the process. This is just a suggestion, this is a starting point, let's talk about it, you know. All of my meetings when I don't know the team are like that. And I think I feel like it's both, I feel like I'm coming into it with like confidence, but confidence in like in wanting to change things if it doesn't work for folks, you know? Yeah.
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 Well, that's really helpful. And like I think a relief sometimes that it can be done that way. Because I think it's a big part of like the culture shift too. For that collaboration and stuff. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah, no worries. I mean, you know, I think people talk a big game about like big dick energy. And to some degree, you know, you come in with that for sure. But like big dick energy for me is like, yo, we got a plan. You hate that plan? Great, you tell me. We'll figure out the next plan, the next version of the plan.
We will
Fuck
collaborate.
yeah, do it. Yeah, like
yeah.
you know? But
Yeah.
I also mentor like other early career folks, and they get very nervous about like, oh, like, you know, they'll be in production meetings and they'll be like, I don't know, like if you guys want to do this, like we can totally do that, but like it's totally up to you, like whatever, I'm fine. And you know, like that actually doesn't output the confidence that you need. But like the language is right. It's just like the confidence around it, right? So yeah, I think it helps.
Cool. Thanks.
No problem. It's learned though. Yeah. I used to have too much big dick energy. But so much that the best feedback, I don't know if I mentioned this to you, Haley, but the best feedback I ever got, it hurt like, oh, it hurts so bad. But the best feedback I ever got in my early career was, Crystal, it doesn't matter how excellent you are if no one wants to work with you. I was like, okay, maybe I'm being too intense. Maybe I should like be a bit more honest and be a bit more like transparent about how we as a collective team might want to do things. So went a long way. All right. Jumping into Tech Weekly. So the anatomy of a tech weekly, it's pretty formulaic. I mentioned this once before, like you're probably going to do all these things. You'll have to form fit it depending on whether you're doing like a site specific or an outdoor, like you just saw, an opera, a musical, a dance piece, like all of these things are slightly different, but for the most part, they have similar elements. And most of these elements have a particular order that needs to happen. They all have dependencies, AKA, you can't focus a light until you hang the light. So what are you going to do first? You're going to hang the light. So your first day might actually just be like hanging and cabling and cleaning up above. Maybe, you're dropping cables down on the floor. You're, plugging in those footlights. You're plugging in those monitors. You're figuring out the masking situation. Like all of that stuff needs to kind of happen first. You need to set your general space first. So yeah, I would say the first thing to do, you're hanging things. You're hanging lights, sound, video. This might mean your screens, your projectors. Maybe if you want to start cheating in some scenery because you have a lot of like flown scenery, this is a good time to do it as well. Often, certainly in union contexts, these are all different teams. So you'll have a lighting team, you'll have a sound team, and then video team. These days, I don't know why in Canada, like video is just not its own, it's not its own team. It's always like seated under someone else. So it's either seated under sound or seated under lighting, and they will kind of work together to figure out what the priorities are of the space. Yeah, your stage team will take care of scenery. They will, if you're working off of line sets, there's a lot of like arbor math that they have to do too, just to make sure the weight is waiting. Yeah, and that everything is balanced. Once that feels good, once you're in a good place, it's usually a very big day, at least 8 hours of the day. Then you're moving into your set install. However, this doesn't mean furniture. If you have a lot of furniture pieces, probably not that stuff. Leave it off to the side. You can spike it if you want to, if that's easier for the lighting designer, but enough for the lighting designer to work off of. You don't want to put things that are in the way. I'm currently doing this massive show called the Mahabharata, which some of you know, and majority of our set is like dirt. But I'm always gonna like have dirt install happen like after lighting focus, right? Because it would be such a pain in the ass to roll a genie around or move a ladder around when there's just dirt everywhere. So it's good to think about like, okay, lighting designer, what do you actually need? Do you need these pieces of scenery? Like, is that enough? If we tape out like where the dirt goes, is that enough for you to kind of work off of? You don't want to get in the way of yourself. You're looking probably at like day 2, maybe like towards the afternoon, evening, depending on what the scale of your show is and how much crew you have. You're moving into focus. I think a good general rule is like focus. You probably want to like budget for about 8 hours of focus. If it's an early career designer, a new designer, maybe it's like 8 to 10 hours. If it's a really fast and seasoned lighting designer, they could probably do it in 6. Yeah, I've also seen like really seasoned designers actually work with another like lighting associate and they both tag team like the focus. It's wild to watch. Like one focuses upstage and one focuses downstage. It's crazy. It's so awesome. So yeah, know what your resources are, know what your team is, and always ask the questions of how they like to work. And then you will have a better sense of how to define that time for them. Focus often requires more darkness. Again, seasoned designers will be better at doing this sort of in half dark. When I'm on a tight like touring schedule, for instance, where we just have to like load in the show as fast as we possibly can, I will often create zones of the space. So like I might work, I think I showed you in in the What You Won't Do for Love schedule, but I might work on the stage while like lighting designer is focusing on front of house focus, for instance, or like I might do some work upstage and lighting designers working downstage, and then we just kind of like keep moving towards the middle, and then, you know, kind of cross. So there's definitely accommodations that you can make there, but again, always a conversation and always dependent on how comfortable your designer is. Focus can't really happen at the same time as sound calibration. Sound calibration, if you don't know what that means, it's calibrating the sound. It's making sure it all is feeding through the system as the designer wants it to. They might be working off of like delays. If it's a really big house, for instance, they might be adjusting those. They might be like sending signal to very specific monitors. It's going to be a lot of white noise probably. And if you want to make sure that your team has healthy morale, might be good to do that on a lunch break. So stagger the team so that they have an hour in the space without anyone there playing with white noise. Yeah, it's one pro tip that people will really appreciate. There's a lot of ladder and lift work also during focus, so that it requires them to yell a lot, which is another reason why you might not want to have those two things happen at the same time. Tech notes is very general language. It's very vague language, but it's just something that I like throw in as contingency time. Throw in, you know, first call a day on day 3, tech notes time. I don't know, could be finishing up the focus, could be fixing that piece of drape that looks a little bit too wrinkly. But yeah, just allows for a bit of breathing room in your schedule. And if you're like so efficient and everything is perfect, take it off. Take it out of your schedule. Tell everyone they have the morning off. Yeah, I've thrown in like very specific layering. Tech notes might also mean like we're dropping down band lines, we're adding some rigging in, maybe we're focusing on that fire effect that the director decided to throw in at the last minute. That might be a good time for tech notes. Pre-levels. So pre-levels, who knows what pre-levels is? Versus, I guess, levels. Okay, it's okay. Well, this is why we're here, we're learning. So pre-levels is just some extra time for the designers to have a bit more breathing room without the director, without the stage manager. So it's their time to be in the space. They are like, you know, painting, not actual painting, but like building in their cues. They're testing things out in the space. Typically the space will be dark. It will be quiet so that everyone can kind of work on top of each other and try things out, start building in cues. It just adds a little bit of breathing room before the director and stage manager come in and stage manager starts putting in all their cues in their book. Pre-levels is actually language that works in an agreement because in the Canadian Actors Equity Agreement, you actually can't label something as levels and not have the stage manager and director there. Yeah, it's just a rule. So anytime you're putting in levels, it's always assumed and the stage manager will always be there. So having pre-levels is just a bit of that buffer time so that the designer can work on their own and then show something during levels time, and then the process gets a bit more efficient because they had that time to prep. So like I said, levels always include stage management and director. Depending on your director, they might want to see everything individually. Show me lighting cues 1 to 10. Okay, that looks good. Maybe tweak that timing here. Okay, show me sound cues 1 to 14. It all sounds good. You know, adjust the fade here, blah, blah, blah. Show me video cues 1 to 4. You know, like they might want to see it like that, or they might actually want to see it all in sequence with everything happening all at once so that they can understand what it looks like visually and auditorily. But that's totally up to your director. They often will kind of talk about that with their stage manager so that stage management knows the process. Bow setup, aka back of house setup. This is some stage management time. I often like to, if there is a stage manager and an assistant stage manager, this is a great moment for that team. One, the stage manager to do levels, and two, the ASM to do any like prop setup, wardrobe setup, like moving out of the rehearsal hall, like whatever they need backstage. This is a great time to like set that stuff up. Performer sound levels, this is particularly in maybe a musical, is one great opportunity for that. So here we have the band doing some sound levels, and once actors are mic'd, great to have, we have a chance to EQ them. Safety walk is the first time the actors are on stage. And this is actually the time where the power or the authority in the room kind of shifts. So all this time, it was the PMT kind of running the room. Now we have a safety walk. We've like, the actors have finally met us, know who we are, what we do, why we have value. It's for their safety. So we're here to show them, we walk them through the space. And once that's done, we hand over that authority to the stage manager, and now the stage manager controls the room. Yeah, it's our job to like to really just empower the stage manager to make sure that they understand how to keep the time for the room, right? So yeah, then the stage manager will do their thing as they typically do. They'll wrangle the room, and then they'll get into cueing. And this is where you take a step back, you get to relax. Yeah, you get to reconcile all of your receipts. You get to watch the show a bit. There's other language here. I think this is mostly in like opera, music world, musical theater world. A Sitzprobe and a Wandelprobe. The difference between those two is a Sitzprobe is more of a sit down kind of sing through, and a Wandelprobe is like a marking through the space, marking through blocking, and a sing through. It's never usually the full show. It's usually just song by song by song. It's like a cue to cue, but for the music. It's often also the first time the band actually gets incorporated in. Band will do like their own scheduling on their own time, their own rehearsals, and then during a Sitzprobe or a Wandelprobe, this is when they're finally integrated with the rest of the singers. I'll work through with tech. Now, I think this might be a generational thing. Way back when, Maria, like when we were at Mount A, like doing you know, Mount A Theater, Windsor Theater, our language was cue to cue, which was, you know, working off of cue to cue to cue to cue. It would never really work through the whole show. It was really driven by the stage manager. I think there's a lot of value there because it gives, again, more control for the stage manager to, I guess, be aware of timing in the room. And again, very controlled by them in consultation with the designers. Stage manager will run the sequence. Is that okay, designers? Do you have any notes? Great, let's move on to the next cue. Actors in your place for this cue. I feel like that's a bit less trendy these days. It's more trendy to do something called a work through with tech, which is more driven, I think, by direction in collaboration with stage management and designers. This is where you're actually going through the whole show, and you'll get to land on the sequences. You can still stop and redo them, but the focus is more on doing the full show as opposed to the cue to cue to cue to cue. Colloquially, we've also heard queuing. This is queuing time. I might use this vague language when I don't know if they want to do a cue to cue or a work through with tech. I don't know. So I might just say cue to cue, and then we determine what's best for the process. Spacing and levels over top is another colloquialism. Some directors really, if y'all know like Mitchell Cushman, for instance, he works, he's the artistic director of Outside the March, does a lot of site-specific work, and he prefers to do something called levels over top instead of a Q to Q or work through with tech. That just means that he doesn't want formal levels time. He just wants to like get in, have the actors on stage, have all the bodies in place, and kind of let's work on all the levels on top of the bodies. And we're kind of negotiating what the priorities are. It's a bit more chaotic, but it feels more like like I said, a generational thing. Like it feels like the young, cool, hip thing to do these days, is to do something called spacing and levels over top. So again, just a bunch of different language. And, it'll be your job to sort of ask, what do you want to do? What works best for you, director or stage manager or designers? Could be a production meeting question. Other bits here, tech dress, I think we know what that is. Tech dress is kind of the first run through. Maybe with like costume pieces, but often not the full dress, full wardrobe. Dress rehearsal is everything as you would the show. I've also tried, I always typically try to do this on the time of the show. So if your shows are typically at 8 p.m., I would want to have the dress rehearsal at 8 p.m. as well too, just because maybe it doesn't make a difference to some, but I know enough performers where it does make a difference in their bodies to have it at the same time. So something to consider just in terms of care. Something that you might also see in a dress rehearsal is that it might be invited. You might get a chance at your first audience, friends and family of the show. This might be a good time for media to come in. They might be like capturing bits of the show. And you might have a photographer in to do production stills as well. A preview, we all know what that is, and opening night. Just very quickly, I'll kind of show you a few examples of a tech weekly. Some are like large scale, some are teeny scale. Most recently, I did something for a show called Cock. It was about a cockfight. Anyway, they really love the name for this. Many innuendos. Anyway, so in this Tech Weekly, it was actually such a quick process. It was site specific. It was very, very low tech. I'm talking like string lights and a Bluetooth speaker, kind of low tech. So there wasn't a lot of like technical stuff to do, but still a lot of logistics to plan. This didn't have a production calendar. It did have a Tech Weekly though. Rehearsals were in Toronto, so I've indicated that. This is one of the few times where I actually throw in the rehearsal schedule as well into the Tech Weekly, just because it feels like it's a small enough scale that everything should be in one place. They also had different times for their rehearsal schedule, so it was easy to kind of just visually show it so that people wouldn't get confused. We had 2 like pre-install days because this show happened in literally a storage unit and it needed a lot of cleaning time. So our first 2 days were all about, again, setting the space, making sure it was ready, putting it in its 0 state so that we could then do a set install and a lighting and sound install. These were outlined in 4-hour calls with a 1-hour dinner break. On Monday, we spent another 4 hours, 5 hours. We spent a 5-hour call just getting the team in place so that they could see it for the first time. We did our back of house setup. This was more of like maybe would be your levels time with director and stage manager, so that they could see all the elements in place before the actors got in. The next day we had some tech notes time, some space prep time. So this was a space that we had to set up and tear down every day. So there was always a bit of time dedicated in the morning for that. a safety walk, and then we go right into spacing. The first call was really spacing with levels because it was a storage unit. It was very dusty and it was very dark. So it made sense to not assume that we were going to be productive that first call and just call it some spacing. So allow for the actors to really get a sense of the space, where their blocking was going to be, yeah, in situ and stuff like that. And then we got into formal queuing the following call. Again, some tech notes time, whatever that meant to them, queuing. And then we start getting into our like tech pre-show time. Tech pre-show is often a half hour if it's like a very low setup. Most union houses require at least an hour and a half feels better because they're firing up the lighting boards, they're firing up the sound, they're like doing all their lighting and sound checks, they're like sweeping the floor, they're mopping the floor, they're like setting up all the stuff, stage management is backstage, like, you know, getting everything done. And then we have our pre-show, which is the formal time when actors are allowed, if you're under the CAEA agreement, that's the formal time when actors are allowed or allowed to be called, I guess. And I mean, concessions, of course, fight or flight, anything like that might be a little bit earlier. But typically, you have your half-hour pre-show before you get into your dress rehearsal. Left room for some shutdown time because, again, we always want to be realistic with our tech weeklies, right? So we want to account for the half hour it might take to get folks into mics or get them acquainted with the space. And then what is that time to get out of costume, to get out of mics, to like, you know, have the chance to save the show and like, you know, I don't know, put the stuff away and then shut down. Yeah, try to be realistic with your schedules. After our dress rehearsal, I allowed for some cleanup time because that's always going to be asked. You know, there's no real time, bandwidth, or brain space to think about what the notes are after dress rehearsal. So you offer some time in the cleanup the next day. And then we go back into our tech pre-show, and our first preview. And because it was a preview, we are allowed to have some cleanup time the following day up until opening. And then once we open the show, that's it, folks. We're done. No more cleanup time, no more notes time. In this instance, I did put the whole show schedule on because it was 2 weeks of shows, actually 1 week of shows. Like there weren't many shows for this particular show, but yeah, I threw that in there. What you won't do for love. You saw the production calendar. The tech weekly, very chill, very quick, very fast. People were nervous, but we were very specific about how we were breaking down that time to the 15-minute mark because people wanted to make sure that they had enough time for all the things. So yeah, I tried to be very specific in this breakdown so that people felt seen, like departments felt seen. They knew that they would have like a 15-minute moment of focus, like brain focus from the room. So putting that in there only adds to the morale. It only adds to like them being heard. And again, kind of, you know, prioritizing what the needs are for each department. So yeah, the Monday, we prepped for focus because we didn't really change the lights, the house plot at all. So we just prepped for focus in that first hour. Then we did our focus. We did some audio prep, had lunch, continued all of that stuff. Stage management came in to do some back of house stuff. Then we, boom, at 4 o'clock, went into our safety walk. Hello, actors. Miriam and Sterla, who are our first round of actors, came in. We got them into mics. They helped us with designer levels, camera levels. And then because we were working with a celebrity, David Suzuki and his wife, Tara, we got them to come in towards the end of the day. Oh, there's a question in the chat, a direct question. I was curious about working hours. Is it something talked about after being contracted. Also, does one work on their own before Tech Week? Also, does one work on their own before Tech Week? I don't know if I totally understand the question. If the person who asked this question wants to elaborate a little bit. But I'll say in terms of like being contracted, there's a bit of a understanding that pending. So first of all, there's always going to be some sort of version of the schedule that's given before a contract. Whether you're a designer, whether you're a production manager, whether you're a stage manager will probably get a fully fleshed out calendar because it'll be much later in the process. But yeah, the working hours, you try to keep it to the industry standard of like 4-hour calls, and knowing that Tech Week is probably going to be like up to 90 hours. But that's mostly on the management side. And hopefully management is, also wanting to reduce the amount of hours where they can. If you're a set designer, for instance, you're probably not needed the whole time, right? So I think you can make assumptions about when and where you need to be at what times. Does one work on their own before Tech Week? In terms of like the space doesn't actually get installed until you're there on first day of install. You wouldn't do like any extra work ahead of that. Of course, there's like builds and stuff, there's like shopping to do. So there might be a bit of prep in that circumstance. But like, I'm not in the theater before install, like sawing some stuff and like, taping some stuff, like I'm not doing any of that before we actually start on the day. I hope that answers the question to some degree. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Great. Glad I made some good assumptions there. Yeah, so because we were working with folks who weren't totally aware of like how the conventional theater process works, we just brought them in as late as we could. We kind of showed them where to go, and we did tops and tails of queuing so that they understood what their jobs were. So you'll probably realize that in this particular circumstance, we've like shifted the priorities to David and Tara here. It's no longer, and that's how I communicated it. It's like no longer, lighting time. It's actually David and Tara time, because David and Tara are not theater people and they're about to go on stage and they're old and, it's late and they live across town. And so we're just going to take the hour and say like, David, come here. The light will shine on you here. And then when you hear the sound cue, you go back to the table like that, so we just took the hour to do that. I gave a bit of time at the very end for just designers to like do any like last minute board notes before they shut down for the night. The Tuesday, I was getting so much anxiety from the video team. So I was just like, you know what, guys? I don't know what the problem is, but I'm just going to throw in some time for y'all on Tuesday. So if everything like is chaotic on Monday, at least you have some time Tuesday morning that is just dedicated to you and you can do whatever you need. They worried for nothing. We actually canceled this call. So, anxiety. Anxiety is totally real. So, morale. You put it in for morale. We had lunch. We did a little extended half for actors to feel a bit comfortable before we did our first dress rehearsal. This was also our tech pre-show time. So we reset the space, pre-show, dress rehearsal, followed by cleanup. The show was only about an hour and a half long. So we had about, 30 minutes to kind of just do a bit of cleanup before we reset everything to do the opening night show. And then we were just in show call for the rest of the week. So very compressed, very intense, but again, still formulaic. We still had to do things that were dependent on other things. So the formula of like when we put in set, when we put in video, when we put in queuing, all of that still remained the same. This will be the last example I kind of show. So here I did throw in the rehearsal schedule. I'm a bit inconsistent in what I tell you. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. Up to you, whatever you're feeling that day, I guess. So I think in this format, it was really helpful to see like that rehearsal and install time overlapped. I'm sure there was value for some reason of why I did that. But yeah, here is like, oh gosh, such a long day. 2 very long days on a weekend. But hey, formula is intact. We did our LX hang, then we did some scenery hang. We had some like big stage install stuff. The designer came in to do a bit of like scenic dressing that she needed to do on the floor before we hung that up. So we gave her like the downstage side. So the logic here that I'm realizing is that I wanted lighting and the vine stuff to be hung. And then I wanted the thrust, which was the apron of the stage, to be built. And then Rachel would come on and build her thing on top of the thrust, which is now like free real estate. And then we would hang the rest of the tree. So that's all sort of the like logistics of that first call and the priorities. My brain is like dying right now, but yeah, the chronology is what I want to say. The chronology of like what makes sense for that call is kind of in this working order. Continued with masking hang, some thrust install work, continued lighting, continued set, continued hang, just hanging stuff. Prod table setup, always something I forget. Good to throw that in. The next day, more stage stuff. They put dirt on stage before focus? I have some words. I wrote this. So whoopsies, I contradicted myself. Probably learned from that moment, to be quite honest. Some space notes. Yeah, lighting focus, space notes. Oh, thank God. The Sunday was just an 8-hour day. Great. Did some lighting focus notes, riser install, pre-levels, sound calibration, notes, forever notes. We had a dark day. Then on Monday, we had a dark day on Monday, probably because that was double time for crew. So definitely don't want to incur that cost. And then the rest of the week was hell because it was 8 a.m. until 10 p.m. Brutal. But this show also needed quite a bit of time. It was quite a challenging piece. I was not the PM who executed the show, but oh, we actually canceled a call. Look at that. But yeah, I advanced it for Carlos, the PM I often work with. So yeah, again, like the chronology is still there, the formula is still there. I'm happy to like download these examples so that you can kind of take with you. I think I have to be done at this point because I do want to reserve some time for any questions. Yeah, the last thing I was going to say was really just production meetings, but yeah, I think, you know, I talk about it a lot in PM class and PM club, that you should just know like what the priorities are of each production meeting. It's your one chance to be like really efficient with your communication with your whole team. It's where you actually have focus with everyone. So knowing what the priorities are of where those production meetings land in the schedule will be really valuable to you. Because more often than not, you run out of time, like I have today. So it's good to prioritize the things at the top in line with what makes sense for the process at that point. Yeah. Anyways, thanks for listening to me talk for like 2 hours and 10 minutes. Are there any questions or like thoughts or sharings or feelings? Yeah. Anything that you took away from today? Any clarifications? Maybe while folks are thinking, I'll just say this is the package that I'm going to prep for everyone who's joined today. Just some easy peasy resources. So that work back plan template, which I love, is like, still circulating the community, which is great. So the workback is definitely a really great tool if you're ever feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed, I don't know where to start. Good to extract all of these things from the workback, just to kind of get those creative juices flowing. And that will be really informative for your calendars. I'll give you an empty template. I'll give you the one that I most like at this point, probably my most recent format, and you can tweak it as you need to. I just remember very early in my career, like spending hours and hours and hours formatting calendars. So let me save you a few hours at least, and then you can just tweak it as you need to. I'll give you the Associated Designers of Canada terms, which has been really helpful and has really empowered me when I'm working with a designer who actually doesn't know like what a prelim, like I said, doesn't know what a prelim or a final is. And I can just be like, look, your contract terms and agreement says right here that this is what this is. This isn't me trying to fuck shit up for you. Like, this is what your union says. So let that be an opportunity to not to stick it to them, but like just to say, keep yourself informed so that you can kind of use it to strengthen your case if folks are getting stinky about that. And again, the interdepartmental nuance matrix should have a better name for that, but it's that matrix that I was showing you. If you ever feel stuck about, I don't know, like, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know these other departments. I don't know how they interact with each other. This doesn't solve that, but it certainly helps to ask the questions. Yeah, I'll templatize all of this stuff. I'll send it your way, and then you can have it when you need it. Haley, how do you usually approach collecting information for a work back without getting overwhelmed by how much and who you have to ask for things? Yeah, good question. It is very overwhelming. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of talking. Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, I think about one example where I was kind of thrown in like very last minute, and there was a lot of drama, and I got the sense that people didn't like certain other people. And it wasn't that I wanted all the tea, but I kind of needed the tea to like better understand what my work back would be. So, asking some general questions about like, how do you feel the process is going? Or like, as a production manager, like, what do you think I should like kind of focus my time on? Like almost asking other people how to do, like asking them how they think you should do your job. This feels a bit counterproductive, but like, could be interesting insight for you, because they might think like, oh my gosh, like watch out for so and so. They always like are late on their deadlines, and it always, messes up my process or whatever. Like, I think that's really helpful. Yeah, without being overwhelmed by how much and who you have to ask for things. Yeah, so always start with your producer, always, then move to your director. And then the director probably actually has a lot more information about the designers already. So you almost are using the director as a filtration for the creative and the artistic stuff, and the producer as like more the administrative tea. Yeah, they will be very helpful in that vein. Using this workback template too, again, for like extracting all the things that you might think is relevant and creating kind of your own baby workback from that workback, is a good starting point. That might also help generate some questions too. Sometimes when I'm thrown in very late in the process, or like, they've only decided that they need a production manager, I'm actually extracting all those things from the workback and then going to a meeting with the director and saying, hey, have you talked about set design stuff yet? You have? Okay, great. Did you guys talk about like a deadline yet? Oh, okay. You're thinking like next week. Okay, great. So I'm just going to write that in. And now I know that everyone expects to have the first deadline to be next week. Now I don't have to like actually create that deadline. It's already been talked about. So it's just my job to like not recreate the wheel. It's just about, keeping consistent with what's already been discussed. Yeah, I hope that's helpful because it can be really daunting, but I promise you, um, if you just like come up with like 5 questions, like and they can be pretty personal. I think like I get a lot of buy-in when I'm like, yo, what's going on with so and so? Like if I can be a bit more like personable with people, um, I think it helps to build trust. And I think they can be really candid about how they're feeling. And if you can like, just build off of that with every person that you speak with, you'll get a sense of like when you do the cross reference that everyone's kind of talking about the same thing. And then you get a sense of like what the actual culture and the dynamics are in the team. Any other questions?
I'll ask a question.
Yeah.
I love to participate.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's just so great to see you and hear the things like the behind the scenes of so much of what you do.
Gosh,
Since our
I've missed
early
you, bud.
days together. I know you too. We'll definitely have to catch up
I know.
and it'll be great. But this is great. So I have a question and it's pretty high level. But if you feel like how do you how do you get involved if you're somebody who is you know really wants to like maybe feels they have things to offer, and maybe it might not be in like a PM role, maybe it is, but it's just sort of even just getting involved in the community, especially um into in a values sort of driven way where it's like, oh, I want, maybe it's like I want to be part of change, or I feel like I want to be part of like the things I contribute, like have their own way. But how do you sort of how do people sort of put themselves out there to be known, even if they don't exactly know the ins and outs of the community, or the communities that are around, such as
Mm.
something like this, but also just not knowing how to follow and a nudge or an interest, but also you know looking to navigate that um in a big old sea.
Yeah. So is it more about like how do you kind of market yourself in a community that maybe through a values approach in a community that may not know you? Is
Oh,
that
that's a great like branch. I was that's actually I'd love to hear what comes up for you around that. And I also just meant sort of even if you weren't sure that you knew if you fit or where you fit, how to like
Mhm.
learn about that, like where could you go to sort of learn or study
Mhm.
around, like just discover what exists.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's so great to see you like in this kind of platform because they're like I know this is not what you do, so it's awesome that you're here. And I think that's a really good example of like putting yourself out there and when we do get a chance to catch up, I would love to know, what you've taken out of maybe what you think is like transferable in this conversation to what your discipline is. I think like on a practical level, uh, people love to talk about themselves. Um, so the best advice I ever got was like, and maybe this is helpful for anyone who's like starting out in their careers or just finished school or whatever, because it was like the exact advice that I got when I graduated from NTS and I was like new to a city and I had just finished an internship at a massive institution and like the industry here was very different and no one knew who I was and like
Mm.
I didn't like there was no reason to hire me or to show my value. Um, so the piece of advice that I had gotten was actually, it was it was because like some old white man like hurt my feelings, and then I like spoke to a teacher, and she was like, you know what, you should like talked to Nina Liakino, who is a very angry Asian woman. And I was like, awesome, I love that. And I just like I cold emailed her and I was like, hey, I just like want to talk, I guess. And this mentor of mine, like, she was like, it's best if you just like ask them how they got here, you know, like don't market yourself. Actually, don't do any of that because it's not super valuable to them. Like, I'm sure they'll remember your name, but they'll probably remember you as being someone who's like really interested and really eager and really curious. And it's actually more valuable for you to just let them talk about themselves and like gather all of that insight and see how you can apply it to your own trajectory than for you to like sit down with a resume and just like talk about yourself. You know what I mean? So yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, it was great advice. So I did a lot of that, and I did it with lots of other folks who weren't just angry Asian women. But you know, there was a lot of I think our values aligned there. She was obviously doing a lot of really great work for the Canadian theater industry at that time, working at factories. She, you know, got a lot of I think hate from a previous generation about like what it meant to be Canadian, and they didn't expect, you know, her or someone who looked like her to be leading that. So there was a lot of value there. Yeah, I've you know, spoken with a lot of other spaces who acted similarly and did a lot of work in that vein too, and just tried to introduce myself. Never really talked about myself. And then when someone finally remembered me, I did say yes to a lot of things. And then my name started to be more visible, I think, in the community. I also did a lot of like opening nights or like tried to be a part of the spaces of the community. So like if there were any like events or celebrations or whatever, like I'm really awkward about networking, but I love to celebrate things. And there are other people who also love to celebrate things. So even if from a visibility standpoint, you're like, you know, going to an event with friends and you're like seeing the same people. And then maybe you're introducing yourself and then maybe you're saying like what you do and what you're curious about and what you're interested in. I find small communities who operate like theater are always down to like connect people. I think maybe the millennial generation is like a big part of that. Like I talked a lot about gatekeeping and, you know, now it feels like there's a different tone because people just want to be like, oh my gosh, you do this, like I don't know anyone who does that, you should speak to this person because they've been trying to look for someone who does that, you know. So there's a great like culture of just wanting to share resources and share people and share community. Yeah, like sorry, my one, maybe my one last example, which gives me a lot of hope for the theater community in particular, is that there's a quite a, I find, a dormant Asian community theater scene right now. Like Fujian was one company that did a lot of work way back when, and now it's sort of been like quiet recently. And I find all the people who really relied on that community have just decided to do their own thing. So now there's like this community that has popped up called the Dim Sum Club, where it's just like all the theater Asians have decided to come together and like, you know, talk about what it means to be part of that community. And it's purely because they're like, oh, I know this person who is also an Asian and like interested in this and like does theater and is a stage manager, and like I'm going to invite them. And then, you know, you find yourself in this like space where you're, you know, getting to talk to people and share your interests. And I think a lot of opportunities to like shadow people or like work with them as like an assistant come out of that too. And I think that gives an opportunity for you to like kind of test the field a bit. Yeah. So yeah, I guess to distill that, that long answer, I would say, you know, find the people that you really admire in your community, ask them out for coffee, pay for their coffee, and just get them to talk about themselves. and how they got to where they are and why you admire them. And then go to public events.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's so beautiful. I just also love hearing what lights people up.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's just one of my favorite things in the world. So it's nice to just watch it ooze out. And I think you're right. I think generationally there's like a shift in there's a shift happening, or I think we're trying to like I think a lot of us are trying to reclaim, being part of that connectedness together and community and collaborating, and that it's just more fun and rewarding for everyone that way when
Yeah.
like so much gets then created and little communities disperse into these other ones. And yeah, that's really cool and feels very makes it really exciting and welcoming, I think, for people to feel like they can join in and belong and not feel like they're gatekeeping themselves from a gatekept thing that's kind of like this demystifies it and stuff. So
Oh,
yeah.
totally. Yeah, I think there are like so many industries. I mean, like theater is obviously a big example, but there used to be this whole sense of like you have to earn your spot here, you have to struggle for this shit. And I just think it's like not really like the rigor should still be there, definitely. I think there are lots of fields, especially in the arts, that are like rigorous and don't have negotiable timelines and like you know get you to work all these crazy hours, but just because it's rigorous doesn't mean it should be like you should be like cutthroat to be in this industry or whatever. And I
Yeah.
think that is a
Yeah.
product of like a different generation for sure.
Mm.
Yeah, but hopefully it's like softening. And I find more I don't know, I don't mean to like hate on an older generation, because there's a lot of value in like the work that they've done to get us to where we are now, for sure. But it was a different time. Like there was scarcity because there weren't a lot of jobs for this, but now it's like flourishing. Now there are too many jobs and now we're all burnt out from that. So like why is there still this culture of like scarcity? Like it's just crazy.
Mm.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm glad it's useful to you, Maria.
Oh my gosh, for sure. Thank you.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you.
yeah, that's awesome. I look forward to when we'll catch up. I can show you some of my matrices too if you want.
Yay!
If you want to nerd out, we can.
Oh my gosh, Matrix party. Next PM club. Bring your Matrix.
I'm clearing my calendar. This is my only priority now.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Yes. I'll
Oh,
text you after this and we'll set up a Zoom call.
sounds good.
Yeah.
Crystal, this is great.
Oh, thank you. Well, I know we have like 3 minutes left, so if anyone else wants to ask a last minute question, otherwise we'll retire for the evening. Yeah. Hey, how's your show going, Haley?
It's going great. Oh, I never emailed you back. That production meeting went really well.
Yay!
I got all my
Congratulations.
answers and they got all theirs.
Yay! That's really good. I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, I think I have another one next week, but I gotta confirm that. But
This is
yeah, it's going pretty good.
production meeting 2 of 2.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, good to hear that that's going well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
actually I
hey.
joined today because I saw it on your story and I went, oh, I have to make a tech weekly. I need a little refresher.
Oh, good. Good. Was it helpful?
Yes, it was very
Yeah.
helpful.
Good, good, good. Yeah, I remember the last PM club we did was part 1 of this series, which was money. And I think it's either guys. It was either like Ivan or Armand who like came to that session, and then like immediately, like a few days after, we did like class, and it was the exact same slide deck. I was like dying because it was so regurgitated. But
It was
it's
probably Ivan. He
yeah.
texted me. He says hi.
Aw, so sweet. I mean, it's good to maybe reiterate it because it's a lot of complex stuff. So yes, I can definitely send over part 1 if y'all are interested. Yeah. Yeah, budgets, more nerd stuff, more
More
templates.
templates.
More Excel sheets. Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Okay, well, thanks so much, folks, for being a part of this. Again, I'm just like so flattered. People like to spend time and listen to me talk about this stuff. So thank you. I really appreciate all of you. Yeah, I'll send out that stuff and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Bye, friends. Thank you.